I still remember the exact moment my life split into two different worlds. The world before my mother-in-law tried to buy my newborn twins. And the world after. The day it happened started like any other. I was sitting in a private recovery room at St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago, exhausted but happier than I had ever been in my life. My twins were only 3 days old, a boy and a girl. Perfect, healthy, beautiful. As I watched them sleeping side by side in their bassinets, I felt something I had never experienced before. Peace. For the first time in years, I believed everything was finally going to be okay. I was wrong. Very wrong, because less than an hour later my mother-in-law walked into that room carrying a briefcase. And before she left, she would offer me $22 million for my children. Not custody, not adoption, not guardianship. She wanted to buy them, like property, like assets, like something that could be transferred from one owner to another. At the time, I thought that was the most shocking thing that would ever happen to me. I had no idea it was only the beginning. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 32 years old, and this is the story of how the richest woman in Illinois tried to purchase my newborn twins, and how I eventually reduced her fortune to zero. It sounds impossible. Trust me, I wouldn't have believed it either. But every word is true. To understand what happened, you need to know who my mother-in-law was. Her name was Victoria Harrington. If you lived anywhere near Chicago, you knew that name. Victoria owned investment firms, luxury hotels, real estate developments, and private equity funds. Her estimated net worth was over $3 billion. Magazines called her a financial genius. Television hosts called her a visionary. Business leaders called her unstoppable. People who actually knew her called her something else. Dangerous. Victoria didn't see people. She saw opportunities, assets, investments. Everything had a price. Everything, including family, especially family. I learned that lesson shortly after marrying her son. My husband, Daniel, was the exact opposite of his mother. Kind, honest, generous, sometimes too generous. He spent his entire life trying to prove he wasn't like Victoria. Maybe that's why I fell in love with him. We met at a community charity event 6 years earlier. I was a social worker. He was volunteering at a youth mentoring program. Neither of us cared about money. Neither of us cared about status. We just cared about helping people. Victoria hated that. From the moment we got engaged, she made her feelings clear. I wasn't good enough. Not because of who I was. Because of what I wasn't. Rich, powerful, connected. According to Victoria, Daniel should have married someone from another billionaire family. Someone who could strengthen business relationships. Someone useful. Instead, he married me. A woman raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs. A woman who still believed people mattered more than money. Victoria never forgave me for that. Over the years, she made countless attempts to break us apart. Some were subtle, others were not. She offered Daniel executive positions if he divorced me. She arranged private meetings with wealthy socialites. She spread rumors about me. She even hired private investigators to follow me. Nothing worked. Daniel always chose me. That drove her crazy. Then something changed. 3 years into our marriage, Daniel and I started trying for a baby. Months passed, then a year, then another. Nothing happened. Doctor appointments became routine. Tests, treatments, disappointments, hope followed by heartbreak, again and again. Eventually, we discovered the problem. Daniel carried a rare genetic condition that significantly reduced fertility. Our chances of conceiving naturally were extremely low. The news devastated us, but it affected Victoria differently. She became obsessed, not with helping us, with protecting her legacy. The Harrington family empire had existed for generations. Victoria viewed grandchildren as heirs, future caretakers of her fortune. Future leaders of her companies. Without grandchildren, her plans would collapse. For the first time in years, she started treating me politely. At first, I thought she was changing. I thought maybe she finally accepted me. I couldn't have been more naive. She wasn't interested in me. She was interested in what my body might produce: a child. An heir. An investment. 2 years later, after countless treatments, surgeries, and emotional breakdowns, a miracle happened. I became pregnant, with twins. When the doctor told us, Daniel cried. Actually cried. I had never seen him do that before. We hugged each other in the parking lot for nearly 20 minutes. We were finally becoming parents. When Victoria heard the news, she reacted differently. She immediately called her lawyers. At the time, we didn't understand why. We would soon find out. The pregnancy wasn't easy. There were complications, bed rest, hospital visits, scares. Every week felt like a battle. But somehow we made it through. 36 weeks later, our twins arrived safely. And 3 days after their birth, Victoria came to visit. At least that's what I thought. She entered the hospital room wearing an expensive white suit and carrying a black leather briefcase. Behind her were 2 attorneys. Not family members, not friends, attorneys. That should have been my first warning. Daniel wasn't there. He had gone downstairs to get coffee. I was alone. Victoria smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile she used during business negotiations. The smile predators use when they already know they've won. Emma, she said softly. We need to discuss the children's future. I felt uncomfortable immediately. What future? She placed the briefcase on a table, opened it, and turned it toward me. Inside were legal documents, property transfer agreements, trust structures, financial statements, and a single piece of paper. $22 million. I stared at the number, certain I was misunderstanding something. What is this? Victoria folded her hands. An opportunity. My stomach tightened. What kind of opportunity? She looked directly at the sleeping twins, then back at me. I would like to acquire full parental rights. For several seconds, I genuinely thought she was joking. None of them were smiling. Neither was she. Suddenly the room felt colder. What did you just say? Oh, her voice remained calm, professional, businesslike. A's compensation. You will receive $22 million. Compensation. The word hit me harder than the number. Compensation, like I was selling real estate. Like I was signing over a corporation. Like my children were inventory. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I looked from her to the lawyers, then back again. You're insane. Victoria sighed. As expected, your initial response is emotional. Emotional. I had given birth 3 days earlier. Of course I was emotional. They're my children. They are also Harrington hairs. No. Her eyes narrowed. Emma, think carefully. She slid the paper closer. $22 million. I pushed it away. No. Your family has never possessed wealth of this magnitude. No. You could change your life forever. No. Victoria's smile disappeared. Most people would be grateful. I laughed, not because anything was funny. Because I was so shocked I didn't know what else to do. You think I would sell my babies? I think everyone has a price. I looked at my sleeping son. Then my daughter. Then back at the woman sitting across from me. And for the first time, I understood something important. Victoria wasn't making a ridiculous offer. She genuinely believed I might accept. That terrified me, because it meant she didn't understand love at all. And people who don't understand love are capable of almost anything. I told her to leave. Immediately. Instead, she leaned forward and said something that changed everything. Perhaps I should explain why these children are worth so much. The moment those words left her mouth, I realized there was a secret. A very big secret. And whatever it was, Victoria was willing to spend $22 million to keep control of it. I just didn't know yet that uncovering that secret would destroy her entire empire. The moment Victoria said those words, every instinct inside me screamed that something was wrong. Not rich person wrong. Not controlling mother-in-law wrong. Something much bigger. Something darker. Because no sane person offers $22 million for newborn babies unless there's a reason. And Victoria Harrington never spent money without expecting a return. Ever. I crossed my arms and stared at her. What do you mean they're worth so much? For the first time since entering the room, she hesitated. Only for a second, but I saw it. A crack in her confidence. Then she smiled again. The same cold smile. The less you know, the better. That answer only made me more suspicious. What secret are you hiding? Victoria stood. I made my offer. No. You should think about it. No, her eyes hardened. Most people regret refusing me. I looked directly at her. Get out. For several seconds neither of us moved. The room felt suffocating. Finally she nodded, as if she had expected this reaction, as if she had already prepared for it. Then she gathered her documents, closed the briefcase, and headed toward the door. Before leaving, she stopped. Without turning around, she said something that sent chills through my body. Whether you accept or not, those children belong to the Harrington legacy. Then she walked away. The door closed, and silence filled the room. I sat frozen beside my twins, trying to process what had just happened. $22 million, parental rights, a secret, a warning. None of it made sense. 10 minutes later Daniel returned carrying coffee. The moment he saw my face, he knew something was wrong. What happened? I told him everything. Every word, every detail. By the time I finished, he looked sick. His face had gone pale. His hands were shaking. At first I thought he was simply shocked. Then I realized something else. He looked afraid. Not surprised. Afraid? Daniel. He avoided my eyes. Did you know about this? No. His answer came too quickly. I stared at him. Daniel. He looked away. That was all the confirmation I needed. My heart started pounding. You knew something. It's complicated. The moment those words left his mouth, my stomach dropped. I hated those words. It's complicated. People only say that when they're hiding something. What aren't you telling me? Daniel sat down. For a long moment he simply stared at the floor. Then he sighed. I didn't think it mattered anymore. What didn't matter? My grandfather. I blinked. What? My grandfather left behind something. Like what? Daniel rubbed his face. A research project. I stared at him. What kind of research project? He looked uncomfortable. Medical. That wasn't an answer. What kind of medical project? Daniel hesitated again. Then he finally spoke. Genetics. Suddenly every alarm in my head started ringing. Explain. He swallowed hard. My grandfather wasn't just wealthy. I already knew that. The Harrington family fortune had existed for generations. What does that have to do with our children? Daniel took a deep breath. My grandfather secretly funded genetic research for decades. I frowned. What kind of research? The kind that was decades ahead of its time. I still didn't understand. Then Daniel said something that changed everything. When he died, he left instructions that certain genetic traits within the Harrington bloodline should be monitored. I stared at him. Monitored. He nodded. Documented. The room suddenly felt colder. What traits? I don't know. You don't know. Mom never shared the details. That answer bothered me. A lot. Because Victoria controlled information the way other people controlled money. If she wasn't sharing details, there was a reason. A very important reason. The next morning we brought the twins home. Normally it should have been one of the happiest days of our lives. Instead I couldn't stop thinking about Victoria's offer. Or Daniel's grandfather. Or genetic research. The pieces didn't fit together yet. But I knew they would. 3 days later, the first clue arrived. Someone broke into our house. Nothing was stolen. Not money, not jewelry, not electronics, nothing. The police were confused. So was I. Until I checked the nursery, the twins were safe. But something was missing. Their hospital records. Every single document. Gone. My blood ran cold, because now I knew this wasn't about money. Someone wanted information, specifically information connected to my children. When the detective finished his report, he asked a question that caught my attention. Who knew these records were here? I immediately thought of Victoria. But I couldn't prove anything. Not yet. Over the next few weeks strange things kept happening. Unknown vehicles parked near our house. Private investigators following us. Anonymous phone calls. Someone accessing medical records. Every road somehow led back to Victoria. Yet there was never enough evidence. Never enough proof. Just enough to make me paranoid. Then came the DNA test. And everything changed. It happened during a routine pediatric appointment. The twins were 6 weeks old. Healthy. Growing normally. Everything looked perfect. Until the doctor entered the room carrying additional paperwork. He looked confused. Very confused. Mrs. Carter? Yes. There appears to be an issue. Oh, my heart skipped. What issue? He looked at the file. Your children's genetic screening results. Immediately I felt nervous. What's wrong? The doctor shook his head. Nothing is wrong. That wasn't reassuring. Then what is it? He lowered his voice. In 20 years I've never seen anything like this. I stared at him. What are you talking about? He flipped through several pages. Then pointed to a section filled with medical terminology. I honestly don't know how to explain this. My pulse accelerated. Try. The doctor sat down. The twins possess an extremely rare genetic marker. I felt my stomach tighten. What does that mean? Normally, nothing. He nodded. Except this marker appears connected to a medical study. I froze. A medical study. The exact phrase Daniel had mentioned. My mind immediately jumped to Victoria. And her grandfather. And the research project. What study? The doctor hesitated. Then he answered. A private genetics program started decades ago. I couldn't breathe. The pieces were beginning to connect. What program? He checked the paperwork. Then read the name. Harrington Genetics Initiative. My entire body went cold. The Harrington name. Right there. Official. Documented. Real, not family gossip. Not rumors. Real. The doctor continued speaking, but I barely heard him, because one question kept repeating inside my head. Why? Why would a billionaire family secretly track genetic markers for decades? And why were my children connected to it? That night I couldn't sleep. After Daniel went to bed, I sat in the living room searching through old family records, photos, articles, company reports, anything connected to the Harrington family. Hours passed. Then shortly after midnight, I found something strange. An article from 28 years earlier. The headline read, Prominent Businessman Funds Revolutionary Medical Research. The businessman was Daniel's grandfather, Charles Harrington. The article described an ambitious project involving hereditary traits and long-term genetic mapping. Most of the details were missing, redacted, hidden, classified. But one sentence stood out, one sentence that changed everything. The program's ultimate objective remains undisclosed. Undisclosed, even back then. They were hiding something. I kept digging. At 3 in the morning I found another article. This one mentioned lawsuits, former researchers, missing records, destroyed data, then another, and another, each one revealing tiny fragments, enough to form a disturbing picture. The project hadn't ended, it had gone underground. Someone continued funding it, someone continued protecting it, someone continued collecting information. Victoria. By sunrise, I had a theory. A terrifying theory. What if the twins weren't valuable because of money? What if they were valuable because of biology? What if Victoria believed they carried something unique, something her grandfather spent decades searching for? Something worth more than $22 million. I didn't know if I was right. But I knew one thing. The offer wasn't about family. It wasn't about love, and it definitely wasn't about inheritance. It was about control. Control over whatever secret existed inside those genetic records. The next evening, I received a phone call. The voice was unfamiliar. Male. Nervous. Terrified. Mrs. Carter? Who's this? There was a pause. Then the man spoke. My grip tightened around the phone. What do you want? Another pause. Then he whispered 6 words. 6 words that changed the course of my life. I'm one of the original researchers. Every hair on my body stood up. The man continued. Your children are in danger. My heart nearly stopped. What? You need to listen carefully. His voice was shaking. Victoria Harrington isn't trying to buy your twins. I felt sick. Then what is she trying to do? Several seconds passed. Then came the answer. The answer that launched my investigation. The answer that would eventually destroy a billionaire empire. She's trying to finish what her grandfather started. And before I could ask another question, the line went dead. I stared at my phone long after the call ended. The screen had already gone dark. The house was silent. The twins were asleep upstairs. Daniel was in his office finishing work, but my heart was pounding so hard it felt like the entire room could hear it. She's trying to finish what her grandfather started. The words kept replaying in my head. Over and over. I immediately tried calling the number back. Nothing. The line had been disconnected. No voicemail, no identification. No trace. Whoever that man was, he didn't want to be found. At least not yet. I barely slept that night. Every noise outside made me jump. Every passing car made me look through the window. Every shadow felt dangerous. For the first time since becoming a mother, I wasn't worried about diapers or feeding schedules. I was worried someone might take my children. The next morning I told Daniel everything. The phone call. The researcher. The warning. At first he looked skeptical. Then I showed him the call log. His expression changed. What if it's a prank? I wanted to believe that. Unfortunately, too many things were starting to connect. The hospital records, the genetic marker, the secret research program, Victoria's offer, the surveillance, the break-in. A prank couldn't explain all of that. By noon, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for answers. I was going to find them. 2 days later another call came. Same unknown number. Same nervous voice. This time I was ready. Who are you? The man hesitated. Then he answered. My name is Dr. Michael Lawson. I grabbed a pen immediately. You're one of the researchers. Former researcher. What do you know about my children? A long silence followed. Then he spoke, more than I wish I did. Something in his voice frightened me. Not because he sounded threatening, because he sounded guilty. Deeply guilty. Tell me everything. He sighed. Not over the phone. My stomach tightened. Then where? After another pause he gave me an address. A small diner nearly 60 miles outside Chicago. Then he said something strange. Come alone. Before I could respond he hung up. The entire situation felt dangerous. Possibly stupid. Possibly illegal. But I couldn't ignore it. 3 days later I drove to the diner. I told Daniel where I was going. He insisted on coming. I refused. If this was a trap, I didn't want both of us walking into it. The diner looked abandoned, old, weathered, nearly empty. Only 3 customers sat inside. An elderly couple, a truck driver, and a man sitting alone in the back corner. Late 60s, gray hair, nervous eyes. The moment I walked in, he recognized me. I knew immediately. Dr. Lawson. I sat across from him. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally he broke the silence. You look exactly like your mother. I frowned. What? His face went pale. Immediately, as if he had said something he wasn't supposed to say. My pulse accelerated. What does my mother have to do with this? Dr. Lawson closed his eyes. Damn it. My stomach dropped, because suddenly I realized something horrifying. This wasn't just about Daniel's family. This somehow involved mine too. Start talking. The old man looked exhausted. Defeated, like someone carrying a secret for decades. Then he began. 35 years ago Harrington created a private research initiative. I nodded. I know that part. No, you don't. His voice was sharp, almost angry. The public version and the real version were very different. A chill ran through me. Explain. He looked around the diner before continuing. The official purpose was medical advancement. And the real purpose? He stared directly into my eyes. Selective genetic inheritance. I froze. What does that mean? The old man's expression darkened. It means Charles Harrington believed certain bloodlines were superior. My heart skipped. What? He thought intelligence, leadership ability, emotional resilience, and business instinct could be intentionally preserved through controlled family genetics. The words sounded insane. Like something from a science fiction movie. Yet the old man's face told me he was completely serious. He wanted to build a perfect family line. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's impossible. Today, mostly. The way he said, mostly terrified me. Dr. Lawson continued. Back then the science wasn't advanced enough. Then why continue the project? His answer came immediately. Because Charles believed future generations would finish it. Future generations. Victoria. My blood ran cold. The old man reached into a folder, removed several photographs, and slid them across the table. I looked down. The first photo showed a research facility. The second showed laboratory equipment. The third made my heart stop. A younger version of Victoria, standing beside Charles Harrington, inside the facility. She had known, for years, maybe decades. I looked up. She was involved and Dr. Lawson nodded. Since the beginning, a wave of anger rushed through me. Everything suddenly made sense. The obsession, the monitoring, the tracking, the genetic testing, the offer. Victoria wasn't interested in grandchildren. She was interested in results. My children weren't family to her. They were research data. The realization made me sick. Then Dr. Lawson handed me another photograph. I nearly dropped it. The woman in the picture looked familiar. Very familiar. My hand started shaking, because I knew exactly who it was. My mother. What is this? The old man lowered his voice. Your mother participated in the program. For several seconds I couldn't breathe. Les? No. I stared at the photo again. My mother standing beside researchers, inside the same facility, smiling, young, healthy, present. The world tilted beneath me. That's impossible. It isn't. My voice cracked. My mother never told me any of this. She wasn't allowed to. Every muscle in my body tensed. What do you mean? The old man hesitated. Then answered. Participants signed confidentiality agreements. I couldn't believe it. My mother had been involved. Years before I was born. Without ever telling me. Why? What had she done? What had they done to her? The questions multiplied faster than I could process them. Then Dr. Lawson delivered the biggest shock yet. Emma. His voice was barely above a whisper. The twins weren't the first successful result. I stared at him. What? You were? The diner disappeared around me. The sounds, the people, everything gone. Only his words remained. You were. I felt numb. What are you saying? The old man's eyes filled with regret. I'm saying the program monitored your family before you were born. Knew. Emma, knew. My voice echoed across the room. Several customers looked over. I didn't care. This couldn't be happening. It couldn't be true. The old man slid another document across the table. My birth date. My mother's records. Research files. Everything matched. Everything. I wanted to tear the papers apart. Instead I sat there frozen. Because deep down, I knew he wasn't lying. The evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Lawson leaned closer. Victoria believes your twins inherited the same rare genetic combination. The same combination. Suddenly the $22 million made sense. The surveillance made sense. The break-in made sense. Everything made sense. Victoria wasn't buying children. She was buying access. Access to whatever she believed existed inside them. The old man continued. She thinks they represent the final stage of Charles Harrington's vision. I swallowed hard. And if she gets them? His face became grim. She'll never stop studying them. A horrible silence followed. Then I asked the question that had been haunting me. Why tell me now? The old man's eyes lowered. For the first time I saw tears. Actual tears. Because 30 years ago, I helped build this nightmare. The guilt in his voice was unmistakable. And now, I want to stop it. For several minutes neither of us spoke. Finally I gathered the documents, the photographs, the evidence. Then I stood. One question remained. The most important question of all. If Victoria has been hiding this for decades. Dr. Lawson nodded slowly. Les, how do I stop her? The old man looked directly at me, and his answer changed everything. You don't attack Victoria. I frowned. What? You attack her money. My heartbeat quickened. What are you talking about? For the first time since meeting him, Dr. Lawson smiled. A small smile. A dangerous smile. Because he knew something. Something huge. Something Victoria desperately wanted hidden. Then he spoke. Her fortune isn't nearly as untouchable as people think. I stared at him. What does that mean? The old man's smile widened slightly. It means Victoria Harrington has a secret bigger than your twins. I felt my pulse racing again. What secret? Dr. Lawson slid one final file across the table. A thick file, hundreds of pages, financial records, corporate structures, hidden transactions, offshore accounts, shell companies. And on the very first page, one sentence. One sentence that would eventually destroy a billionaire empire. Saarayan tao fo untu ionf ru de investigayon. I looked up. Dr. Lawson's expression was deadly serious. And then he said the words that launched the war. Emma, Victoria's entire fortune is built on a lie. I sat frozen inside that diner. The file felt heavier than it should have, as if the weight wasn't paper, as if it was decades of secrets, decades of lies, decades of stolen lives. I stared at the words printed across the first page. Herento feud io and Fred iden vistigat. For years, the public had viewed Victoria Harrington as a business genius, a self-made billionaire, a financial mastermind, a woman who could turn failing companies into profitable empires. But now I was holding evidence suggesting something very different. I looked up at Dr. Lawson. Is this real? The old man nodded. Every page. My heart pounded. If this is true, why hasn't anyone exposed her? A sad smile crossed his face. Because Victoria spent 30 years making sure nobody could. I opened the file. The deeper I looked, the worse it became. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, false charitable foundations, manipulated investments, fraudulent asset transfers, millions of dollars moving through layers of companies that existed only on paper. The system was incredibly complicated. But one thing became obvious. Victoria's empire wasn't as strong as it appeared. It was built like a tower balanced on glass. Powerful from a distance, fragile up close. I looked at Dr. Lawson. Why give this to me? His eyes filled with regret. Because she destroyed people. His voice cracked. Good people. The old man stared at the table. I helped create the monster. For the first time, I understood what was driving him. Guilt, not revenge. Guilt. The kind that follows someone for decades. The kind that never lets them sleep. And now he wanted redemption. Even if it cost him everything. I drove home with the file hidden beneath a blanket in my car. The entire trip, I kept checking my mirrors. Paranoid, nervous, certain someone was following me. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. At that point, I trusted nobody. When I arrived home, Daniel was waiting. The moment he saw my face, he knew something major had happened. We spent 4 hours reviewing the documents. Every page, every account, every transaction. The more we read, the more disturbed we became. By midnight, Daniel finally looked up. I think she's vulnerable. I blinked. What? He pointed towards several financial reports. These companies. I leaned closer. What about them? They depend on investor confidence. I frowned. So, Daniel tapped the table. If investors lose confidence, everything collapses. The room fell silent. A dangerous idea was beginning to form. For years, Victoria had controlled everyone through fear, money, influence, power. But what if her power wasn't real? What if it only existed because people believed it existed? That thought stayed with me. For days, then weeks, as I continued investigating. The deeper I dug, the more horrifying the truth became. Victoria wasn't merely protecting the genetics program, she was funding it, secretly, millions of dollars every year, laboratories, researchers, data collection, private surveillance, everything. And the money came from foundations supposedly dedicated to children's health care. The hypocrisy made me sick. She claimed to help children, while treating my own children like laboratory assets. That was when I made a decision. I stopped thinking like a victim, and started thinking like an investigator. If Victoria wanted a war, I would give her one. But on my terms. The first step was finding allies, people Victoria had hurt, people she believed were powerless. There were more than I expected. Former employees, former partners, former executives, former researchers. One after another, stories emerged. People who lost careers, people who lost savings, people who lost everything, and every story led back to the same person. Victoria Harrington. The public saw a visionary. The victims saw something else, a predator. Within 3 months, our small group became something bigger. Much bigger. Accountants, attorneys, whistleblowers, investigators, journalists. People who had spent years waiting for someone brave enough to fight back. For the first time, Victoria wasn't facing a single enemy. She was facing all of them. And she didn't even know it yet. Then came the first mistake. Victoria contacted me, directly. A private invitation, dinner, at her estate. No lawyers, no witnesses, just the two of us. I almost laughed when I received it, because suddenly I understood something. She was nervous. For the first time in her life, Victoria Harrington was nervous. I accepted immediately. Her mansion looked exactly the way I remembered. Massive, perfect, cold, the kind of place designed to impress strangers rather than welcome family. Victoria greeted me personally. Her smile never reached her eyes. We sat across from each other in a dining room larger than my first apartment. For several minutes we discussed meaningless things. the weather, the twins, business headlines. Neither of us mentioned the real reason I was there. Finally, she set down her wine glass. I hear you've been asking questions. I smiled. I hear you've been hiding answers. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Victoria leaned back. You're making a mistake. I almost laughed. No. I looked directly at her. You did. For the first time I saw genuine anger, not irritation, not annoyance, anger. The kind powerful people feel when someone stops obeying them. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Her voice was calm, but her eyes weren't. I leaned forward. Actually, I think I do. For several seconds we stared at each other, neither willing to blink. Then Victoria said something unexpected. Something honest. Maybe the first honest thing she'd ever said to me. You remind me of your mother. The words hit me like a punch. My mother, the woman connected to the program, the woman who had never known the truth. Victoria saw my reaction and smiled. A cruel smile. She knew exactly what she was doing. She asked questions too. I clenched my fists beneath the table. What happened to her? Victoria didn't answer immediately. Instead she stood, walked toward a large window, and looked out across the estate. Finally she spoke. Some people are happier not knowing the truth. The answer chilled me. Because it wasn't really an answer. It was a warning. And we both knew it. I stood. The meeting was over. There was nothing more to discuss. As I reached the door, Victoria spoke again. Her voice echoed through the room. You still have time to walk away. I turned around. And for the first time in years, I felt absolutely no fear, only determination. You offered me $22 million. She said nothing. I continued. You know what that tells me? Her eyes narrowed. I smiled. It tells me the twins are worth much more. Then I walked away and left her standing there alone. 3 weeks later, everything exploded. A national news outlet published the first story. Then another. Investigations opened. Regulators became involved. Federal agencies started asking questions. Investors panicked. Stock values dropped. Board members resigned. For the first time, Victoria's empire began cracking in public. And once cracks appear, people start looking closer. More whistleblowers came forward. More evidence emerged. More secrets surfaced. The avalanche had started, and nobody could stop it, not even Victoria. Then came the biggest revelation. The hidden foundations, the secret funding, the genetics program. Everything became public. The headlines were brutal. The woman who spent decades controlling information had lost control of the narrative. And every day brought new damage. By the end of the year, billions of dollars had evaporated. Lawsuits multiplied. Assets froze. Partners fled. Banks demanded answers. Victoria fought desperately. But she was losing. The empire she spent a lifetime building was collapsing around her. And for the first time, people stopped fearing her. That hurt her more than any financial loss ever could. Because Victoria's real addiction wasn't money. It was control. And she was watching it disappear. One piece at a time. One secret at a time. One truth at a time. Meanwhile, my twins were growing, laughing, learning, living normal lives. The lives they should have had from the beginning. Free. Not assets. Not experiments. Not investments. Children. Just children. And every time I watched them play together, I knew the fight had been worth it. Because this was never about money. It was never about revenge. Not really. It was about protecting them. Protecting their future. Protecting their right to decide who they would become. A right Victoria never believed anyone should have. 18 months after the investigation began, the final judgment arrived. The courts ordered massive asset seizures, corporate dissolutions, financial penalties, restitution funds, everything. When the dust finally settled, analysts estimated that Victoria Harrington's accessible fortune had effectively been reduced to almost nothing. The woman, once worth billions, had lost nearly everything. The headlines called it one of the largest financial collapses in modern corporate history. But none of that was the part I remembered most. The part I remembered happened months later. A quiet afternoon. A public park. My twins were playing near a fountain, laughing, running, being children. And across the street I saw Victoria. No assistants, no security team, no entourage. Just an elderly woman sitting on a bench. Watching. For a brief moment our eyes met. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Then she looked away. And for the first time, she looked small. Not powerful. Not feared. Just small. I took my children's hands, turned around, and walked away. Because the war was over. I had already won. Not when she lost her fortune. Not when her companies collapsed. Not when the headlines destroyed her reputation. I won the day my children stopped being something she could own. And became what they were always meant to be. Their selves. Years later, when people ask me what happened to Victoria Harrington, I usually give the same answer. The truth. She spent her entire life believing everything had a price. Businesses, relationships, loyalty, family. even children. In the end, that belief cost her everything. And if there's one lesson I learned from the whole experience, it's this: the most valuable things in life are the only things money can never buy.